Hello guys, welcome to a new video of Fischer series. Today look around number 2 of the Bled tournament of 1961. It's Fischer against Mikhail Tal, the reigning world champion of 60-61. And actually Tal's in a lost position after only 8 moves. How is that possible? Well, Fischer even sacrificed his queen, so let's just dive straight into this very beautiful game. Fischer has the white pieces and he starts with e4. c5 by Tal, the Sicilian. Knight to f3, knight to c6 and d4, going into the open Sicilian. Here we see c takes, knight takes, and e6 by Tal. And this is actually called the Taimanov variation, named after Mark Taimanov, who Fischer famously beat in 1971. Well, the purpose of the Taimanov is to play queen c7, push d5 in one go, a6, b5, bishop b7, rook c8, and just launch an attack on the queen side. Well, Fischer annotated this game in the 60 memorable games, and he says, no doubt Tal expected knight b5 here, which I had played exclusively at the Buenos Aires of 1960. So that's why Fischer tried something else here, knight c3, here queen c7, and here you can play bishop e2, castle, or play bishop e3, queen d2, castle long, and go for a kingside attack. Well, here Fischer plays g3, and the purpose of g3 is not only to perhaps fianchetto or bishop, but also to gain control over the f4 square, in which we can put our bishop and attack the queen on the dark squares. So what now? Well, Tal here plays knight f6 after a long thing, and Fischer says, this is probably the losing move. Tal looked worried immediately after having made it, but I'm not sure he was convinced he had really been careless. Well, how can this be a losing move? After knight f6, the problem is here that we allow the white knight to jump into b5 and attack the queen with tempo. That's why on the top level nowadays we see a6 to gain control over the b5 square. After g3, knight f6, we see knight b5, but simply queen b8. So it's still pretty equal. Bishop f4. You can see this problem now, also attacking the d6 square 3 times. And here there's only one move for Tal to keep the game equal. And that's e5 here. And that's not a pretty move you want to make, since white now has a lot of control over the d5 square. So the d5 push by black becomes really hard. Well, Tal here played knight e5. If he had played e5, something like bishop g5, a6, knight a3, and b5, bishop takes, b4, very important, bishop drops back, and something like pawn takes. Here you cannot take the pawn, because then you're losing the knight, knight c4, and the game would continue something like this. Well, after knight to e5, the problem is that the knight is pinned to the queen. But we actually want to attack the knight twice, but first, before attacking it twice, for example, queen d4 would be a nice move, but then we would have this fork. So first we play bishop e2 to prevent the fork, and then prepare queen d4. Tal sees that, so he plays bishop c5, controlling the d4 square, but now we change plans. We take the knight, queen takes, and f4. And the bishop is blocking the queen to go to this beautiful c5 square. It has to go back all the way to b8, and now e5. And here, okay, you could move the knight back, but it's really passive. Tal tries to play a counterattack, a6, but simply pawn takes knight. And after pawn takes, you have doubled pawns, and we can even take another pawn. Paul Keres suggested here knight e4, bishop back to f8, something like queen d4, and here we can take the pawn, long castles. But Fischer simply takes the pawn here, pawn takes g7, now rook to g8, and now knight to e4, but now the bishop can go to e7, queen d4, and here Tal plays rook to a4 to attack the queen. Fischer here says in the book, a desperate attempt to complicate. Better is queen c7. Since after rook to a4, simply knight f6 check. And you cannot sidestep the king, then we have queen b6 check, queen c7, queen takes, king takes, and you lose your rook. So after knight f6 check, we have bishop takes, queen takes, and now queen to c7, attacking the weak pawn, but simply long castles. And okay, this is a free pawn, so rook takes, but simply king b1. Rook has to move back to a6. And here Fischer plays the second best move. Well, the best move here would be bishop h5, threatening this. d6, rook to e1, threatening winning this pawn since it's pinned here. Queen e7 and queen to h6, winning the h7 pawn, and this would be a lost position for Tal. Well, still Fischer played the second best move. Bishop takes b5. Now rook to b6 and bishop drops back to d3. And now e5. And here you can see that the rook is attacking the queen. Tal probably hoped that Fischer would take the pawn with check. Queen takes, pawn takes, and rook takes, and Tal is down a pawn, but still the game goes on. But Fischer here plays a beautiful move. F takes e5. Since after rook takes queen, sacrificing the queen, we have pawn takes rook. This is really dangerous. The rook is trapped here. Well, it's not really trapped. You can sidestep the king. Then we have bishop takes, rook to e8, and rook to e1. And if you take our rook, rook takes, no one's guarding the g7 pawn. So that's why here we see Tal pawn hunting. Bishop takes rook, queen takes f6, and rook to f1, queen takes g7, and bishop takes f7 check. And at the end of this beautiful combination, a bishop against a bishop, 2 pawns against 4, and 2 rooks against the queen. So this should be winning for Fischer. Let's see how it continues. King to d8, bishop e6, queen h6 attacking the pawn. Simply bishop takes, since after bishop takes rook to f7 we win back the bishop. Bishop, queen takes h2, and now rook takes d7 check. And this is probably already a lost position. We see the game continuing a bit. And here actually a really nice move by Fischer, g4. Looks like a free pawn. But if you take the pawn, we have rook h1, threatening checkmate here. You have to defend the h8 square, but simply rook h8 anyway. Since after queen takes, you would lose like this. So that's why Tal doesn't take the pawn. Eventually, Fischer manages to put his rooks on the 6th rank here. And there's basically nothing Tal can do. Well, here b3. And after rook to a6, threatening rook a7, Tal resigned the game. Since there's nothing you can do. So, for example, queen e8, rook a7 check, king has to go up, rook d7. And you can see that we always have this ladder checkmate. Even if you check us, simply king to a2. There are no checks anymore. Queen drops back, rook check, king sidestep, check, sidesteps, check, king sidesteps to f8, and eventually rook h8 check, and we would win the game like this. This was such a beautiful game by Fischer. I really hoped you enjoyed this video. If so, please like, subscribe or comment, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.